23 years ago, Claire Henderson walked away from the only woman who ever truly knew her. She built a life of measured success, a corner office, a mortgage paid on time, a routine so predictable it hurt. Then Margaret Shaw walked back into that life, standing in the rain outside Claire's Boston brownstone at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, suitcase in hand, asking a question that shattered everything. If I'd stayed, would we have made it? Some doors once closed echo forever. Some loves refuse to stay buried. This is the story of what happens when the past stops being memory and becomes choice. The radiator in Claire's Beacon Hill office had been making the same metallic groan for 6 years. She'd stopped hearing it the way she'd stopped hearing most things, through practiced, deliberate inattention. Outside her window, November rain hammered Congress Street, turning the cobblestones into black mirrors that reflected the amber glow of gas lamps. Boston looked like a city designed for regret. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost declined. Claire Henderson. Professional, clipped. It's Margaret. 23 years collapsed into the space between heartbeats. Claire's hand tightened around the phone until her knuckles whitened. The rain suddenly sounded louder, the office smaller. Margaret. The name tasted like copper and honey, like every mistake she'd ever made wrapped in the memory of skin and salt. I'm in Boston, Margaret continued, her voice exactly the same. That husky alto that used to read poetry aloud in their college apartment while Claire pretended to study. I need to see you. That's not, Claire started, but honesty ambushed her. Why? Because I'm 51 years old, and I'm tired of pretending I don't think about you every single day. The admission landed like a physical blow. Claire stood, walked to the window, pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Below, a couple shared an umbrella, their bodies angled toward each other with the unconscious intimacy of people who'd chosen each other and kept choosing. She watched them until they disappeared around the corner onto Tremont Street. Where are you staying? The question escaped before wisdom could stop it. I'm not. I'm outside your building. I've been here for 20 minutes trying to decide if this is brave or insane. Claire looked down. There, beneath the struggling maple tree she'd watched shed its leaves every autumn for a decade, stood a figure in a dark coat, phone pressed to her ear, face turned up toward Claire's window. Even from 4 stories up, even through rain-streaked glass, Claire knew the angle of those shoulders, the way Margaret stood with her weight slightly shifted left, favoring the knee she'd injured playing soccer their sophomore year. Her body remembered before her mind caught up. Heat flooded her chest, spread down her spine, pooled low in her belly, a physical recognition that had nothing to do with logic and everything to do with the wordless knowing between atoms that had once learned each other's rhythms. 4th floor, Claire heard herself say. Unit 4B. She hung up, stared at her reflection in the window, a successful architect, respected, controlled, 49 years old and so carefully constructed, she barely recognized herself. Her hair, once wild and long, now cut into a practical bob that required no thought. Her clothes, neutral tones chosen for their invisibility. Her life, a series of careful decisions designed to require nothing, risk nothing, feel nothing too deeply. The buzzer sounded. Claire pressed the button without allowing herself to think. Then she opened her apartment door and stood in the hallway, listening to the elevator's mechanical ascent, each floor a small eternity. The doors opened. Margaret stepped out, and time performed an act of violence, erasing decades, collapsing distance, making a mockery of all the careful forgetting Claire had engineered. She'd expected aging, some visible proof that years had passed. Instead, she found the same green eyes, the same generous mouth, the same way of standing that suggested both strength and uncertainty. Margaret's hair had gone silver, worn long and pulled back in a way that somehow made her more beautiful, not less. Lines bracketed her mouth, creased the corners of her eyes, evidence of laughter, grief, the full catastrophe of living. "You look," Margaret started. "Don't," Claire interrupted. "Don't say I look good. Don't make this easier." "I was going to say you look exactly how I remembered, which terrifies me because it means I haven't been imagining things." Margaret set down her suitcase. "Can I come in, or are we doing this in the hallway?" Claire stepped back. Margaret entered, bringing with her the scent of rain and something else, some essential Margaretness that Claire's body recognized with a ferocity that felt like drowning. The door closed. They stood in Claire's carefully curated living room, all clean lines and neutral colors, deliberately impersonal, and the space suddenly felt obscene, a lie told in furniture and paint. "Why now?" Claire asked. "Why tonight, after 23 years of nothing?" "Because my marriage ended 6 months ago. Because I kept trying to build a life that made sense and it kept feeling like I was reading someone else's lines." Margaret's voice cracked, then steadied. "Because I woke up this morning in Portland, looked at my life, and realized I'd spent 2 decades being someone I'm not, with someone who wasn't you, and I couldn't do it for one more day. The honesty was—" Margaret stayed that night, and the night after, and the night after that, until staying stopped requiring explanation. They didn't sleep together, not yet. Instead, they performed an archaeology of memory, excavating who they'd been and who they'd become in the space between. On Friday evening, Claire took Margaret to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They stood in the Dutch room, where empty frames marked the spaces of stolen Rembrandts, the absence more powerful than any presence could be. Rain tapped against the glass ceiling of the courtyard, and somewhere a string quartet practiced Schubert. "I used to come here when I needed to remember that beautiful things can survive being taken," Claire said. She stood close enough to Margaret that their shoulders almost touched. "That museums don't fill the empty frames because the absence tells its own story." Margaret studied the gilded frame that had once held the storm on the Sea of Galilee. "What story does your absence tell?" "That I learned to mistake safety for happiness. That I built a life of such careful smallness it couldn't hurt me." Claire turned to face her. "What does yours tell?" "That I married a good man I didn't love and tried to make it enough. That I had 2 children who deserve better than a mother who was always somewhere else in her head." Margaret's voice dropped. "That I left the only person who ever made me feel like myself and spent 20 years trying to find that feeling again in all the wrong places." An elderly couple passed, holding hands, their bodies moving in the synchronized rhythm of decades. Claire watched them disappear into the Titian room and felt the ache of all the ordinary intimacies she'd denied herself. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I'm not 26 anymore. I can't just burn my life down and start over." "I'm not asking you to burn anything. I'm asking if there's room." Margaret's hand found Claire's, their fingers interlacing with a muscle memory that transcended time. "I have children who need to meet you if this is real. I have an ex-husband who deserves honesty. I have a life in Portland that doesn't just vanish because I want it to. And I have a business, a reputation, a routine that works." Claire's thumb traced circles on Margaret's palm, contradicting her words with touch. "This is insane. We're not kids anymore." "No," Margaret agreed. "We're better. We know what we're risking. We know what it costs to live half a life." They left the museum as evening settled over the Fenway. The streets glistened with rain and the air smelled of wet leaves and possibility. They walked without destination, past brownstones with lit windows revealing fragments of other lives, a family eating dinner, a woman at a piano, a cat sleeping on a radiator. At the corner of Newbury and Fairfield, Margaret stopped. I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate it. Claire's stomach dropped. What? I'm falling in love with you again. No, that's not right. I never stopped. I just learned to live with it like a chronic condition. Margaret's eyes held hers, unflinching. And I need to know if this is just nostalgia for you or if it's real. The question hung in the wet air between them. Traffic hissed past. Somewhere a saxophone player busked a melancholy version of Autumn Leaves. Claire thought about all the careful distance she'd maintained, all the walls she'd built brick by brick. Then she thought about Margaret's suitcase still sitting in her guest room, about the way conversation flowed between them like no time had passed, about how her apartment felt less like a museum and more like a home since Tuesday night. It's terrifying, Claire said finally. You're asking me to feel things I spent decades learning not to feel, to want things I convinced myself I didn't need. I know. I have a meeting with a client Monday morning, a pitch for a medical complex in Cambridge, 6 months of work, and all I can think about is whether you'll still be here when I get home. Do you want me to be? The truth pushed up through all the fear. Yes, God help me, yes. Margaret kissed her then, on the corner of Newbury Street, with the rain starting again and the city moving around them. It wasn't the tentative kiss of rediscovery, but something deeper, recognition, hunger, the acknowledgement of time lost and time remaining. Claire tasted salt, rain, memory. Her hands found Margaret's waist, pulled her closer, and her body came alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Margaret laughed, a sound of pure, uncomplicated joy. We're making a scene. Let them look, Claire said, surprising herself. She took Margaret's hand again, this time without hesitation. Come home with me. I want to show you something. They walked back to Beacon Hill, to Claire's brownstone with its careful decoration and deliberate emptiness. Claire led Margaret to her study, to the wide drafts. Monday morning arrived with the violence of alarm clocks and obligation. Claire stood in her closet, staring at suits that suddenly felt like costumes. In the kitchen, she could hear Margaret making coffee, humming something classical, Brahms maybe. The domesticity of it made her chest tight. Her phone rang. Her business partner, James. Please tell me you're on your way. The clients are early, and they brought their entire board. 20 minutes, Claire promised, though she hadn't showered yet. She hung up and found Margaret in the doorway, holding out a travel mug. Go, Margaret said. I'll be here when you get back. Promise? Promise. Margaret kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made Claire's eyes burn. Go convince them to hire you, then come home and convince me to stay. The meeting went brilliantly. Claire presented the medical complex design with a clarity born of having something to lose, something to return to. But all through the PowerPoint slides and discussion of load-bearing walls, part of her mind stayed in that kitchen, with Margaret's humming and the offer of coffee and the way home had started meaning something it never had before. She returned at 3 to find Margaret on her laptop at the dining table, surrounded by papers and post-it notes, legal documents, divorce paperwork. Margaret looked up, and the strain around her eyes told its own story. David wants custody, Margaret said without preamble. Full custody. His lawyer is arguing that my lifestyle choice makes me unfit. The words landed like blows. Claire set down her briefcase, moved to Margaret's side. Can he do that? In Oregon, maybe. The laws are better than they used to be, but family courts still have a lot of discretion. Margaret's voice was steady, but her hand shook. My daughter Emma is 16. She'll have a say, but my son Josh is 12, and he's always been closer to David. Claire pulled out a chair, sat down, forced herself to think clearly past the surge of protective rage. What do you need? A lawyer? Money? I have a lawyer. What I need is to know if this is worth it. Margaret's eyes, when they met Claire's, held a terrible vulnerability. If I fight this, I'm dragging my children through a public battle where their mother's sexuality is going to be questioned and judged. If I back down, I lose you. There's no version of this that doesn't hurt someone I love. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too airless. Claire stood, paced to the window, stared out at Beacon Street, where life moved with oblivious normalcy. A mother pushed a stroller. A student hunched against the wind. The world kept turning while hers threatened to fracture. I can't be the reason you lose your children, she said finally. Margaret, I can't. Stop, Margaret's voice cut through her spiraling. Don't make this decision for me. Don't decide what I can or can't sacrifice. I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything. Yes, you are. You're asking me to choose safety over truth. To go back to Portland and pretend this didn't happen. To protect my children by teaching them that love is something you hide, something shameful. Margaret stood, moved to Claire, took her face in both hands. I left you once because I was afraid. I will not do it again. Even if it costs you your children, it won't. Emma already knows. I came out to her 3 months ago before I left. She's the one who told me to come find you. Margaret's thumb traced Claire's cheekbone. And Josh is smart and kind and he loves me. He'll adjust. It might take time, but he'll adjust. You don't know that. No, Margaret admitted. I don't. I don't know if this will work. I don't know if we can build something real after 23 years apart. I don't know if my kids will forgive me for upending their lives, but I know that staying would kill something essential in me, and I'm done choosing slow death over the risk of living. The declaration hung between them, fierce and absolute. Claire thought about her drawings, her secret architectures of longing. She thought about the empty frames in the Gardner Museum, about absence and presence, about the courage required to choose visibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from James. They're signing the contract. Biggest project of our careers. Celebrate tonight? She looked at the phone, then at Margaret, then back at the phone. The medical complex would take 2 years, maybe more. Site visits, client meetings, late nights at the office, all the careful scaffolding of her professional life, demanding attention, demanding time, demanding the version of herself she'd spent decades perfecting. And here was Margaret, demanding everything else. I need to tell you something, Claire said, and you're going to think I'm insane. Try me. I want to sell the firm, my half anyway. James has been wanting to buy me out for years. The words came fast before caution could stop them. I want to design houses, Portland in December was gray and wet and unexpectedly beautiful. Claire had expected to hate it, this city that had harbored Margaret for 2 decades while she'd been in Boston, alone. Instead, she found herself charmed by the food carts clustered on every corner, the Powell's city of books with its labyrinthine rooms, the way Forest Park stretched green and endless through the hills. Margaret's house sat in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, a 1920s craftsman with a wide porch and overgrown garden. Standing on the sidewalk with her suitcase, Claire felt the full weight of what she was doing, inserting herself into a family, a history, a life that had existed complete without her. Second thoughts? Margaret asked, watching her face. Constant thoughts, terrified thoughts, but not second thoughts. Claire picked up her suitcase. Let's do this. The door opened before they reached it. A girl stood in the frame, tall, angular, with Margaret's eyes and a wary expression that Claire recognized from every mirror she'd looked in at 16. Emma. So you're her, Emma said. The one Mom couldn't stop talking about even when she was pretending she wasn't talking about you. Emma, Margaret started. It's okay, Claire interrupted. She met Emma's eyes directly. Yes, I'm her, And you must be the daughter who told your mom to stop being miserable and come find me. Thank you for that. Emma's expression shifted, surprise breaking through the wariness. She told you about that? She tells me most things. I'm still learning which stories I missed and which ones I get to be part of going forward. Claire held out her hand. I know this is weird. I know I'm a complication in an already complicated situation. But I care about your mom, and I'm hoping we can figure out how to make this work. Emma looked at the offered hand, then at her mother, then back at Claire. She didn't shake it. Instead, she stepped aside, holding the door open. Josh is in his room. He's not ready to meet you yet. That's fair, Claire said, stepping inside. The house was warm, lived in, full of the evidence of family, photos on the walls, backpacks by the door, a cat winding between chair legs. Claire felt like an archaeologist entering a tomb, reading the hieroglyphics of Margaret's life without her. Here was Margaret at Emma's graduation from middle school. Here was Josh's soccer trophy. Here was a wedding photo, Margaret in white, David handsome and smiling, both of them looking young and hopeful, and like they believed the lie they were telling. I'm going to make tea, Margaret said, her voice tight. Emma, would you show Claire the guest room? Emma led Claire upstairs, down a hallway lined with more photos. She stopped at a door painted pale blue. This was going to be Dad's office, but he never used it. Mom set it up for you. Claire stepped inside and felt something in her chest crack open. The room was simple, a bed, a desk, a chair by the window. But on the desk sat a vase of fresh flowers. On the bed, a quilt in blues and grays that matched the color scheme of Claire's Boston apartment. Margaret had prepared for her, made space, believed she would come. She's been different since she met you, Emma said from the doorway. Lighter, like she was holding her breath for years and finally remembered how to exhale. Your mom is... Claire stopped, not sure how to finish. She's the bravest person I know. She left Dad for you. She's risking losing us for you. Emma's voice was steady, but her eyes held a challenge. That better mean something. It means everything, Claire said simply. But I need you to understand, I'm not here to replace your father. I'm not trying to be your parent. I'm just trying to love your mom and not screw up your life in the process. Too late for the not screwing up part. Dad's lawyer is calling Mom a homewrecker who abandoned her children for a sinful lifestyle. It's all over their divorce proceedings. Emma's voice cracked. My friends are going to find out. Everyone at school is going to know my mom is gay and left my dad and you're terrified, Claire finished, of the judgment, the whispers, the way people will look at you differently. I know. I've been there. How did you handle it? Claire sat on the edge of the bed, gestured for Emma to join her. Badly at first. I hid. I dated men I didn't love. I built a life so carefully closeted I almost suffocated in it. She looked at this fierce, frightened girl who was so much braver than she'd been at 16. But you're already handling it better than I did. You told your mom to go. You chose truth over comfort. That's remarkable. It doesn't feel remarkable. It feels like everything is falling apart. It is falling apart. That's how things change. They break first, then rebuild differently. Claire pulled out her phone, showed Emma one of her house designs. You know what I do for a living? I'm an architect, and the first rule of renovation is you have to... 3 months later, the custody hearing ended with shared custody and Emma's choice to live primarily with Margaret. Josh needed more time, more therapy, more space to understand. Claire designed her first residential project, a small house in Oregon City for a young queer couple who wanted a place that felt like home. Margaret started teaching poetry at Portland State, finding her voice again after years of silence. They didn't live happily ever after because life isn't a fairy tale. They lived honestly ever after, through hard conversations and harder compromises, through Emma's graduation and Josh's slowly thawing anger, through the ordinary miracles of shared mornings and collaborative evenings. On their 1 year anniversary of Margaret's arrival in Boston, Claire gave her a gift: the architectural plans for a house. Their house. 2 offices, 2 closets, 1 bedroom with windows facing east to catch the morning light. Ready to build something? Claire asked. Margaret looked at the plans, at this woman who'd chosen her twice now, and said the only thing that mattered: yes. Ready to experience more love stories that challenge conventions and celebrate second chances? Follow for weekly stories about finding love when you least expect it and having the courage to choose it when you do. Because it's never too late to build the life you were meant to live.